us again to finish out his PowerPoint presentation, which I am very grateful for. I've had a long week. It started out good. Scott and Henry and Ollie and I went down to camp on Sunday. Everything was great, and then Wednesday morning I started to get cold symptoms. And so out of self-interest, but also out of the interest for everybody else at camp, I ended up heading home Wednesday afternoon, and I was sick Wednesday, Thursday.
Did you go to the doctor?
No, it just had cold symptoms. So I was sick Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Recovered Friday essentially, and then yesterday, Len and I went hiking, which I'll explain. And then I got home yesterday afternoon, or yesterday evening, and then last night, woke up at like 2 in the morning with a headache. And I've never had this before. I looked it up and there's some fancy word, but I think I strained something in my neck, which caused a headache in the rest of my head.
Welcome to AGE.
So I got a total of like 2 hours of sleep last night. So I'm glad Scott's here to teach this morning. It's been a rough few days, but we went up to Coldwater Lake. Has anybody been to Coldwater Lake? You know that's out by Mountain Commons. I highly recommend it. It's often never crowded because it takes a bit to get there, and since the Johnson Ridge Observatory is closed until 2026, nobody goes there right now. And there's a beautiful lake. You can kayak, canoe. You can also hike around it. Okay, I'm going to hand the mic over to Scott. Everything seems to be working this morning. Fingers crossed.
Hey, Jesse.
Yeah.
One thing we'll have going on this morning, we've got a children's art class all this week here in the fellowship hall. So at 10:30, the teacher will be showing up.
Okay.
And it's going to be setting up the room. So after we're done today, just leave everything in the room. And I'll get her organized as far as getting it.
Sounds good. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Jesse. Good morning, everybody. Good to be with you. This will probably be the end of my presentation, pending your all questions, which is great. I don't really have that many more slides to go. Again, we're talking about, we started city history, we talked about the development of the institution of the city, and then we talked last time about the organizational chart here. I think I got through everything that I wanted to say about the org chart here as it's laid out, as you see on the screen. It's a pretty typical organization for cities, especially medium to smaller sized cities in Oregon. There are 240 cities in the state of Oregon, and there are the big ones. There's a handful at the top. Portland is clearly the biggest, 660,000 people. You've kind of got your next tier of cities. You think of 100,000 plus: Salem, Eugene, Gresham, Beaverton, Hillsborough, Medford, Bend. So those are like the next tier, and then you've got a whole bunch of cities who are between 20 and 50,000, and that's the primary number for Clackamas County cities. That's the big cities you think of. The biggest city in Clackamas County is probably an Oregon City or Lake Oswego with about 35 to 40,000 people at this point. Wilsonville's grown pretty quick. Happy Valley just jumped over us to go from 16,000 people about 10 years ago, and now they're approaching 25,000 people. I think they're all that growth on 172nd. Sandy and Estacada have seen growth, but most of us are in the 20,000 population range, and that include us and Happy Valley and Wilsonville. Gladstone's smaller, it's about 10,000 people, but Canby is about 10,000 people, I think. So that's kind of the mid-tier, and for cities, most of the cities in Oregon, this is a structure you'll see pretty common. Most of us have the manager council form of government, where the council hires the manager. There are some cities that still have elected, two cities have elected city recorders, still Ashland and Hayes City, or Hill, a really small town, like 200 people somewhere. And then most of us have this. So any questions, comments, thoughts on the org chart before I move on to my last slide, I believe? Any questions about that? Nope. All right, so the last thing I'm going to talk about is how...
You have 3 more.
I have 3 more slides, look at that. Whatever they are, we'll tackle them together. Here comes Linda. Good morning, Linda. So one of the most important functions that a city has to find a way to fulfill is engaging with this community, because if the folks at City Hall get disconnected too far from the community, there can obviously be some political ramifications for that, and it's just important that an efficient, open, transparent city hears from its residents. Every time there's a city council meeting, every regular session meeting, the first and third Tuesdays of the month, there's an opportunity for the public to come and provide comment, and you can comment on anything you want to. There's a community comment time on the regular session agendas. Those meetings are 6:30 at City Hall, the first and third Tuesdays of the month. And then there are other times the public is invited to engage with the city during a public hearing on a specific topic, or generally speaking, if you see something on the council agenda and you want to talk to that, usually the mayor, the chair of the meeting, allows for comment during that time. But it is the chair's discretion outside of the community comment and hearing that spectrum. But the other most important way that the city hears from and gets input directly from residents of the city is through our boards and committee system. And it's pretty standard across most cities. Cities have, a varying number. I've heard some cities have like 30, 40 committees. Those are for maybe your larger cities. And then for cities about our size, which are a medium, small city, we have 12 standing committees, and they're listed here for you on the board. I'll go through them real quick. Before I get too lost in the weeds of those, the city has an annual recruitment process. So if you're interested in serving on the city board or committee that I'm about to talk about, there are kind of two paths that I would highly encourage you to think about doing. And one caveat, most of these boards and committees, most of the positions require you to be a resident of the city, so you have to live in the city limits. But all of them, except for the budget committee, allows for up to 2 non-resident members. So even if you don't live in the city of Milwaukee, if you want to be engaged in the city's work, there are non-resident positions. So don't let that be a deterrent to seeking out some way to get involved if that's what you're interested in. We do an annual recruitment process. So from February to April, we accept applications. There's an online form. I should be better about making a note about that here at church when the setup is that, different worlds, and it's just I have different thoughts. But February 1st and April 1st is when we accept applications, and then April and May we do interviews, and so in June we make city council. We set up a slate of appointments for city council to appoint members. So if you're interested in getting involved in the city, the next open recruitment period will be next year, February to April. There's another process that if you're interested in getting involved and learning about how the city governs, like kind of what I've talk about, but in a very monthly, hyper-focused way. The city has a leadership academy. It's called the Milwaukie Leadership Academy, and up to 25 people. That's an application process, and that'll come out in the fall. And one of my colleagues in the city manager's office runs that, and they meet once a month for about 7 months, and they deep dive into all this. You hear from all the city directors, you hear from the city manager, a member of council. You kind of go deep. So that has kind of turned out to be a really good pipeline for people interested in getting involved in the city, seeing how all the things work, and then towards the end of that period is when the application for boards and committee is open. So the Milwaukie Leadership Academy, if you're interested in that, let me know. And it's an application in the fall, and then you meet once a month at City Hall and talk about different things. The other thing, there's a third path if you are interested in getting involved in your community. The city has 7 neighborhoods, and so this is primarily for folks who live in the city. The city has 7 neighborhood district associations which meet monthly. And so those are we call those the NDAs. And that's also a great avenue. And it's hyper-local because it's like Lake Road. We're in the Lake Road neighborhood here, and the Lake Road NDA, I believe, meets at Milwaukie Floral. And it's the same, like a third Wednesday of the month or whatever their schedule is. It's kind of that deal. So NDAs, admin application process, and the Leadership Academy are really good ways to get involved. All that being said, folks, go through those processes or get appointed to the city by city council to these committees. And this is a pretty standard, like I was saying, slate of types of committees you'll see at local governments. In alphabetical order, we have an arts committee. They work on arts projects. City council's designated some funds for public art. If you've been downtown, you've seen a couple of their murals, like the mural on the back of Milwaukee High School's auditorium. That was a city commission mural. The mural of a heron on the post office building, that was a city commission mural. There's some other murals around town. At the old City Hall where Freeman is, there's a sculpture garden that the city still owns that's curated by the Arts Committee. So Porch Fest, is anybody familiar with Porch Fest? Yep, that's led by our Arts Committee. Being in the new year, the New Year Eve celebration where the lit cherry gets dropped, that's also an Arts Committee project. So that's the kind of stuff they do. They've been very active. The audit committee meets, I think, twice a year, and they do what you might expect. There's a requirement that at least one of them be a CPA, and they audit the city's books, and they work with our auditing firm to issue, hopefully, a clean bill of health every year. But that's what the audit committee does. Our budget committee is that one committee that has to be resident members of the city per state law. The budget committee is one of our bigger committees at 10. All 5 members of the city council are on it, and then 5 citizen members, residents of the city per state law, are on the committee. So it's a 10-person committee, and they do what you would think a budget committee do. They meet quarterly to review the budget, ask questions, staff informs the budget committee of pending changes or requests to move money around or whatever. And then the city has a biannual budget, which means we adopt one every 2 years for a 2-year period. So this year, we are in the off year. We adopted a budget, council adopted a budget last year, so this has been a relatively light budget year for meetings. But next May, April and May, the budget committee will meet at least 3 times outside of their quarterly meetings to hear from staff to review the annual budget for the next 2 years. So, budget committee, subcommittee of the budget committee is our community utility advisory committee. Used to be more of a standalone separate committee, but that's the group that works specifically with our public works staff to get input on the utility rates, the water and sewer rates that the city charges, and then makes basically a bunch of data based on how the system's running and the flow and the needs, capacity, and all that stuff. If there's infrastructure projects, capital improvements to be made, then they make recommendations for rates. So if you live in the city and you have questions about why your water utility rate just went up as of July 1st, you can trace a lineage back to the city council ultimately approved it, but then it's that CUAC, the Community Utility Advisory Committee, that made the recommendation, the initial recommendation to increase it or to not increase it from here. Any questions about those first A's and B's and C committees? Pretty straightforward. Then, in response largely to the events of 2020, a lot of cities adopted committees to look at equity and diversity and inclusion, those kinds of efforts. And here at the City of Milwaukee, the City Council created the Equity Steering Committee, made up of residents of Milwaukee of a diverse number of backgrounds, from gender, race, sexual orientation, income, mobility, abilities and disabilities, a whole spectrum of folks who come together and they look at various city policies and provide input and direction on what the city should do differently or adopt or change. And in particular, especially in the events of George Floyd in 2020, this group, sort of a predecessor to this group, but the nucleus of the Equity Steering Committee reviewed all of the Milwaukee Police Department's policies, and they had some really tough conversations. It was also coupled at the same time, the city was in the process at that moment of negotiating a new contract with the Milwaukee Police Employees Association, the police department union. So there was a year or 18 months there where the folks on this Equity Steering Committee at our police department and our city leadership had some really frank and stern questions and came out of it harmonious, if you can believe it, and really happy to have gone through the process. Not that everyone was thrilled with the reality of the world. I'm not saying we solved all of its problems, but that's sort of the committee that is helping us be a better city. Yes?
I know federal funding doesn't factor into your budget much, but has there been any pressure from the federal administration regarding your inclusion program?
As far as I'm aware, the political pressure of the city, Jesse's question was, has the city received any federal pressure or pressure from the federal government regarding our Equity and Steering Committee or other diversity, DEI type policies? And outside of the general threats and statements made by the White House and the federal government, I don't know that Milwaukee specifically has been the target of any.
Probably on the radar.
Perhaps on the radar, but I know that other cities in our own county have received that pressure, and probably more political pressure from their communities to end those programs. Clackamas County ended its program, their DEI program, and cities like the city of Estacada decided to end its equity committee in response to that type of pressure. I will say other meetings, and our politicians here in Milwaukee have probably heard about it, but they have been resolute, and they've in fact made statements that they're essentially, I don't know if doubling down is the right way to say it, but we're not ending our equity, and our city manager and our city council have made statements earlier this year that we're not ending what we believe to be the values of Milwaukee. So, so no, we're moving on. We're continuing on. Okay. The next, any questions about equity and that front? The city does have an equity and inclusion coordinator working with people across the city.
How long have we had an equity committee?
It was created in, I think 2021, but possibly 2022.
Okay, that's really recent, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? All right, moving alphabetically down, we have a very popular and beloved library, the Letting Library, named after Florence Letting. I think I talked about the history of that before. And it has a library board, and they do all the kinds of library support things that you would expect. They provide input to the library director about policy changes. One that they were supportive of that recently came down is that, and then it was just adopted by City Council in our new fee schedule for the year. The library is no longer charging fines for late or overdue books. There was an equity decision on equity because they were kind of suggesting that the amount of money collected for fines is very de minimis. I think it was like 25 cents a day, and even it added up, it wasn't a big expense. And so, just to kind of remove that stigma, they removed there's no more fees for late books or library items. And that's something that they've seen other libraries, even in our own Clackamas County library system, doing away with. The other interesting thing, there's a couple of interesting things about our library. We have a library board, which is appointed by City Council, but we also have a very active and a wonderful group of people in the Friends of the Letting Library. Some of you are nodding your head, maybe you've heard of them. They do amazing work. They raise tens of thousands of dollars on a normal year to support our library. They have a book sale store in the library from which they're supporting them. They have an annual or semi-annual, maybe it's quarterly now. They have a big book sale every once in a while, so if you're a bookophile, the Friends of the Letting Library, they're great. Also, the other interesting thing, and this kind of gets to what I think I talked about earlier, did I mention the UGMA, the Urban Growth Management Area, before when I was talking about the city's boundaries? So the city's urban growth management area extends east to I-205 and not south because of that political cartoon and the folks in Oak Grove don't want to be in the city. So we grow east. So we have most of the city's policies and decisions affect the people in the city limits currently, but we do keep an eye on that group of folks between Linwood Avenue and I-205, where the mall is, and 82nd Avenue, because theoretically that will one day be in the city of Milwaukee. So we have an UGMA map that we kind of take care of. In addition to that, our library is a part of LINK, which is the Library Information Network of Clackamas County or something like that. And that assigns all parts of the county to a library. And so the Letting Library is assigned obviously the city of Milwaukee's boundaries, but also a library district that extends beyond the city's borders currently. I think it mostly incorporates our UGMA, so to about 205, and then Happy Valley has a library that would then take the library district east of that. So our library board includes residents of not only the city, but in our library district area. So the unincorporated areas there. It might go, that library district might not appear strictly speaking to the city boundary, and it might go a little into northern Oak Grove. But as most of you probably know, there are also libraries in Oak Grove and Gladstone. And so there's different library districts down there. So the library board has a support group of friends, and then they also kind of tend to represent a geographic area slightly bigger than the city because of the library district network. Yeah.
So the park that surrounds the library that's just been redone, is that part of the library's jurisdiction, or does that belong to the park board?
That would be that's a city park,
Oh, it is a city?
and run by North Clackamas Parks.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's a great segue. Any other questions on the library?
How is it related, for instance, to the library that's going to be in the old Concord Elementary?
How's our library?
Yeah, is that a county library that's different than the city library?
Services, including library in the unincorporated area, are provided by the county. So the county runs the that to North Clackamas Parks District campus, if that's what they're doing, or is that what they're doing?
I think it,
Concord Elementary
It's
Is that where the
right.
library is
being
going?
remodeled.
right.
That's what the sign says.
That sounds good.
There's a new library goes
That's-
right next to the Concord Elementary School.
Strictly speaking, it's technically different branches of the county, but that's the county providing services, and since that Concord school site is a county-owned via the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District, which is technically a special service district, which is chaired by the County Board of Commissioners. It's all county, so the county moving the library to a county facility, that makes sense there. And the Reading Library is in the same network, countywide network as that library is. So if you check something out, sorry, Linda, if you want to check something out in the Reading Library, but we don't have it, that network, that catalog we can view is countywide. It might come from Concord, it might come from Lake Oswego or Cicada. They're all linked and they share materials and resources.
So if the county bans a book, let's say the county bans.
That's a good question.
And Milwaukee says, no, we're not gonna ban those books. How does that work?
That's an excellent question that I would 100% defer to my library director colleague to answer fully. But my sense is the city fully controls the Reading Library. And so if we don't want to ban a book, which we definitely are not in the business of banning books, then we wouldn't ban the book. And we're part of a network that maybe other libraries wouldn't, and then they would have to figure out how they would stop the books coming from Milwaukee. My sense is that the link, the library network of Clackamas County is also not really in the mindset of banning books. And the county commission, as politically comprised now, I don't think they're in the majority interested in banning books too. So in the immediate future, it's probably not something we're super worried about, but if it came to that, I think that because the city-owned library, the city policies would hold sway. Linda?
Well, I just wanted to FYI regarding the new library at the Concord Elementary School. They are receiving suggestions on what to name that library because they do not want to call it the Concord Library. So if you have a special name or you want to, refer a major person in Clackamas as a name for that library, they're open to suggestions.
Judy Smith.
So they're not just retaining.
No, please, no.
In case you didn't know, we do have a member of the Oak Grove Council at our church. Linda is a member of the Oak Grove Council. That's the, what's that called, Linda? Those are community, what are they
It's an
called?
Oak Grove Community Council.
Yeah, those are community planning organizations, CPOs,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
CPOs.
So the county version of maybe neighborhoods, that maybe got a little more of a
Oh, because we
focus.
also work with Oak Lodge.
Yeah.
They have their own
Yeah.
community council, but we work with them.
Unincorporated areas ideally have county organized and supported CPO, community planning organizations, and Linda's a member of the Oak
And
Grove.
many people who've been on the boards for decades and are very opinionated.
So if they don't want to name it after the Book of Concord, maybe we could call it the Augsburg Confessional.
Yes, that's great. And it's, naming policies in the public arena and government is a really interesting, sort of a wonky, nerdy road to go down, but we've struggled with that and chewed on it, had different people, different opinions about it over the years. And the kind of one of the fundamental questions it comes down to is, do you name something after someone, or do you name something after a mountain or a river or something that's less likely to become potentially controversial in a couple of years? The school district, North Clackamas Schools, has had an interesting take on this, and they named a high school in the last 10 years, Adrian C. Nelson. I think their name was Hoodview, kind of penciled in before, and they had a naming committee, and that can be a relatively politically dicey conversation to have, depending on the responses you get. But, okay, that's the library board. Moving in, we have a nice segue, ask a question about the parks. I think I touched on this before, but the city kind of has a complicated relationship with its parks maintenance agency. The city of Milwaukee proudly owns all of its parks, which includes the park behind the Reading Library, which is called Scott Park, which is not for me, but it's for Richard Scott, the Richard Scott family, and that's the family whose name is, from my understanding, Mount Scott is that same Scott family. They had a farm area kind of towards the base. I don't know how it went up the mountain, but they own farmland out towards Mount Scott, and so they also own property downtown Milwaukee, and so they donated that land behind the park to be Scott Park. But that's a city-owned park maintained by North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. The improvements that you see at that park were completely through the city's lead in securing funds and funding those improvements at that park. And then there's a little pocket park up in the Ardenwald neighborhood called Balfour Park off Balfour Street that got redone. And then in this neighborhood, just a few blocks that way, Bowman Bray, at the end of Bowman and Bray Streets, was also redone. We got money through different federal fund sources under the last administration coming out of COVID, and funneled through the state legislature, funded, I think, $2.5 million funded redevelopment, refurbishment of those three parks. Actually, Balfour and Bowman Bray were just empty lots before they were turned into parks now. But they had been bought by the city a couple decades ago, 4 parks.
And who determines if they need a new name?
Who determines if
Yeah,
they
like
need it?
Bowman Bray is really long.
And it doesn't say much to what that park is. In that case, in Bowman Bray, Balfour, and Scott Park, that'd be the city council that have ultimate authority as the property owners. If you live outside the city and you're talking about the Concord School or the park area around Concord or any new parks outside, the authority would be North Clackamas Parks District, which is also the county board of county commissioners. So who gets the name and who owns it? So with all that, with the city owning the property, but we're in a district, North Clackamas Parks District. We have an intergovernmental agreement with NCPRD that they maintain all of the city's parks. You might ask, and they have a board, they have district advisors, a district advisory committee, DAC, for the North Clackamas Parks District. What is the role of the city's Park and Recreation Board? And that's a very good question. And that's a very good question that we've chewed on for decades without a super satisfactory answer, I think, for everybody. Until 1991, the city ran its own parks department, and we joined North Clackamas Parks, and physically and with staffing, that parks department was merged with NCPRD. But we've maintained the Park and Recreation Board, and largely the role of the park since then has been to kind of spearhead these park development projects. A lot of the 2 of the parks I mentioned, Balfour and Bowman Bray, those are properties the city acquired after 1991, so after we were already in the Parks District. In the late 90s and early 2000s, a big park project was the development of North Clackamas Park into with the ball fields and the rose garden and all that stuff, so that was a focus of the park. In the early 2000s and the 2010s, a focus of the park board, and we also had a riverfront task force. Riverfront task force was developing what is now called Milwaukie Bay Park. And so there have been these specific projects that park has involved themselves in, but in these lull times, after those projects are done, there's been some question about what park is supposed to be doing. And they've taken to an advocacy role. They try to encourage North NCPRD to do certain park policy things, but it's created a bit of frustration because their charge in this multi-layered level of who runs our parks is the question. So that's park. Any other parks questions?
You know, Scott, I've noticed some of the parks around here are more like just undeveloped natural areas, like up by where the big swimming pool is up there.
Yep.
If you go downhill from there, I mean, it's just kind of open.
That's an interesting, we do have a couple of natural areas.
Are those part of the park system?
Officially, I don't think any of them actually are. The area around Elk Rock Island kind of feels like a natural area, and that's a city park, but there are several. The 2 that come to mind near or in the city limits that are called natural areas actually aren't run by the city. If you know where the Milwaukie Marketplace is, where New Seasons is, and the Planet Fitness, behind Planet Fitness, that's 32nd, I think. There's Milwaukie Springs natural area, which is there's no parking lot kind of across the street, and there's a natural area wetlands in there. That's run by the Nature Conservancy. But if you were to listen to the mayor for any amount of time, she's constantly over there. They're doing work parties, cleaning it out. And it can kind of feel like a city park, but it's the Nature Conservancy. And then the Three Creeks Nature Area that you mentioned, south of the Aquatic Center in Clackamas Community College, that's actually right now owned by Clackamas County Water Environment Services, WES. agency to take over running it, because they're not in the park business per se. So that's actually a good question. It's not city owned, and technically they're not outside city limits, but it borders the city, so annexing that, if the city were ever one they take over, it wouldn't necessarily be a hard thing to do. But yeah, until now, there've been quite a few naturally looking parks around the city. Yeah.
Okay, I read in the little Clackamas County circular that came in mail, they West just received a grant for $625,000 to work on 3 creeks. So I'm wondering who's going to handle the traffic problems in that area that's already horrible
Yeah.
during evening traffic things, and there's a lot of homeless people that live in there. Because I found it's kind of dangerous to walk your dog down there.
Absolutely valid concerns, and when they asked, and it's been almost a year, so I'm sure, I think I saw that too, Wes got that grant funding. They're obviously trying to be proactive about the property that they own. But they also, at least last year when they reported to council, they were candid that they aren't really in the parks business, and so they'd really prefer somebody else who runs it for those very same concerns. There's no parking, and it's a pretty good sized natural area with lots of places to hide. So developing it into even a more accessible natural area, even if you don't make it a full-on developed park, you're gonna have to make some infrastructure improvements. You have to consider,
Which should be part of this big improvement with the stormwater that they're putting through there.
could be.
But the other problem with that is if the city annexes it, there's no money the city gets at it, because it's a public piece of property.
It is public, so there's no one paying taxes on it, that's
Right.
true. And it is outside city limits right now, and it's not city-owned property, it's West. But whoever would take on it, whether West can continue to control it, whether NCPRD acquires it, whether the city annexes it, buys it, annexes it, and turns it into a park, those are the exact things that are gonna make it kind of an interesting situation. There is an aquatic center right next door. I mean, there's parking with the community college. I mean, there's ways to potentially handle it. Then you're also gonna have to work with Clackamas Community College to, their parking lot, if that's a thing. Those are the questions that'll have to be resolved with that property. It's a really cool park, and it's right there. It's in the middle of an urban area. It could be an amazing asset, but the agency that owns it right now isn't really set up to do those things, and I don't know if anybody else is up for taking that on at the moment. It's kind of the rub, I think.
I used to work for West,
Right?
so I know that has always been a problem area because nobody wants it. A lot of people love it, and there's no money to take care of it. This grant, I put a call into the woman I know that's going to run the project because I would like to work on it right
Yeah.
close to my house.
It could be such a really cool thing and
Yeah.
a really amazing spot, but it will need some focused resources for sure.
Right.
Okay, so yes.
I've often thought of that area as politically convenient to hide our houseless population. It's been about 20 years since I went on a homeless count with the Sheriff's Department. But that was a huge focus for the Clackamas County Sheriff's Department for just the sheer number of people living there.
Yeah.
And
I'm used to
I'm not sure the county wants to do much with that because it's a catch-all. It's a place where it's out of sight, out of mind. People go on 82nd and don't even know it's underneath them.
Right?
You know?
You're going on a bridge over that.
Yeah, and by the way, the art underneath that bridge, the Union Pacific underpass at 82nd is gorgeous. I think we need to, do a video of that or something. Whoever's tagging that's got some real talent.
Urban art,
Very well. The arts committee needs to look into it.
there's possibilities. An agency needs to take full control and decide what to do.
Is the park that, I don't even know what it's called, it's right off of McLaughlin there, where it has the bridge that comes down into the park, and then there's a bridge over Kellogg Creek, I think?
Yes, that's in city limits and that's a city park.
That is a city park.
It's a little confusing because the parcels were purchased separately over time, or so if you're going north on the block, they don't know what we're talking about, we're going north on the Milwaukie Boulevard, the light rail train and the heavy train goes over you, and just to the right of that, there is a park area that has a newer elevated pedestrian pathway. That is called Kronberg Park,
That's right.
because the Robert Kronberg family donated that south end of the creek to the city to be a park. And then you cross the bridge under the heavy, next to the heavy, under the light rail bridge, you cross, and then the park property that's on that downtown north end of the creek, that's called Dogwood Park. And then hopefully we're increasingly connecting it to Milwaukie Bay Park. So there's technically 3 parks in there, but if the dam is removed and the creek bed goes down, there's more natural area park property there. I could see that being an opportunity to rename that entire corridor. I think the Kronberg end has to stay Kronberg, but Dogwood is a name that's obviously important to our city, but nothing specific about that location is Dogwood, so we could make it part of Milwaukie Park. But, okay, because this is taking more than 15 minutes, I told you. But,
Good.
but,
Scott was like, oh, I'm not gonna have much today, maybe 15 minutes. I was like,
I'll be back for number 4 next time. Okay, so moving on. The board or committee that has the most authority outside of the city council is our planning commission. They review land use applications, and people buy property, they want to do certain things that sometimes they fall outside of the city code in terms of what they can do. They have to ask for a variance, okay to do things differently, and there's a process for that. I don't try to get too deep into the planning commission because it's a planning, if some of you maybe have been involved in building things or getting zoning things done, it's a whole world of law that I don't pretend to know anything about. But the planning commission has the only authority outside city council to approve applications. And so if you come to the committee and you want to, well, there's an example right here in Lake Road. Last year, a resident, 36, 34th, somewhere up the hill over here, wanted to add 13 feet to a garage. And they had it on the property, but they would kind of come right up next to their neighbor's property line. The neighbor objected, and so it was this whole thing. They went through the land use application process. The planning commission, I believe, approved it. And then the appeal, if someone doesn't like that decision, they can appeal that to the city council. The city council, in a lot of cases, is the final vote, and the city council upheld the planning commission decision. I believe approved the 13 extra feet on the garage. And those are the type of things, some of those, that's kind of maybe a smaller thing to big land use development when you bought property like the Cherry Uniforms land down here that has now 52 homes. That's a subdivision, and a subdivision, the people who own that property worked very closely with the city's planning department and then figured out all the details about how they could build the homes and the street plate and all that stuff. And then it comes to the planning commission for approval. So planning commission can make those decisions on its own. It's a 7-member commission, and that one allows up to 2 non-resident members to be on it. And if it's interesting, it's very policy wonky at times because they really get into the weeds of what the code says about certain things. And I love our planning staff dearly, but if you've ever met or know a planner, they can be very intense, very detail-oriented individuals, and lovely human beings. And I don't want to be a planner ever. So that's the planning commission. We have a public safety advisory committee, which in my 13 years at the city, 12 years at the city, when I first got here, it kind of had this law enforcement focus, and it was really a committee that saw itself in supporting the Milwaukee Police Department, which, similar to the library, we do have a Milwaukee Public Safety Foundation, which that is their whole goal. They largely raise the money to support our K-9 unit, and we have a K-9 right now. We have K-9 Flora. If you're on Instagram, K-9 Flora has an active Instagram page. And very cute golden retriever, lab, something like that. So we had a Public Safety Foundation, and then about 10 to 11 years ago, the City Council said, we want to refocus you to be more of a transportation safety committee. And so this was the committee that helped develop all the list of projects for our SAFE program, the Safe Access for Everyone program that I talked about last time with the sidewalks and the pedestrian pathways around schools and then going across the city. It was the Public Safety Advisory Committee that helped shape the list and then present it to City Council, and they can now get regular updates from the city engineer and the police department. So they kind of do some, and they're also kind of leaning now into community emergency response. CERT stuff, like what to do when there's an earthquake or natural disaster, or any emergency volunteers in the immediate time. They're kind of leaning back into that. So that's the Public Safety Advisory Committee. On the subject of CERT, is anyone familiar with what CERTs are? It's not a unique to Milwaukee thing. There are CERTs across, I think Helene, Jesse's wife, is part of a search and rescue. It's a little bit different.
Well, no, but she is in search and rescue, but she's also a part of our, they call it NET, Neighborhood Emergency Team, which is also CERT.
CERT, yeah. So there's an active community emergency response team, CERT group in Milwaukee. They've kind of bounced around, sort of associated with the city, sort of associated with MPD, Clackamas Fire. Starting very soon, they're kind of coming back under the city umbrella, under our Public Works group, maybe it's the police department. But they will be working with the Public Safety Advisory Committee, but also, I think, MPD. So there's a community emergency response team. If you're interested in getting involved in that, you live in the city, I can help you connect with the folks who are in charge, or are and want to be in charge of that, going to be in charge of that. And I know there are other CERTs across, if you don't live in the city, there are CERT groups across the county. It's kind of a really, another hyper-local thing to get involved in.
Yeah, Oak Grove has it, sir.
Oak Grove has a CERT, yeah.
Is that the earthquake preparedness group, you think?
Emergency.
Yeah. Earthquakes would fall under the umbrella of disasters they would help respond to.
But I mean, in terms of keeping people, aware of earthquake possibilities.
I've seen in healthy and active CERT groups, they will do that kind of advocacy. They'll go to, if you're going to be at a Milwaukie Fest event, which is a week this next Saturday, downtown Milwaukee, the CERT is often called upon for events like that to help with traffic control or just kind of hone their skills in terms of managing large crowds and then advocating. They'll sometimes have booths to advocate for being emergency prepared for emergencies. So that's CERT and Public Safety Advisory Committee. And then our last one is one of our newer ones. This is an area that can get a little, people have big opinions. About 10 years ago, Milwaukee's always cared about and spent a lot of time talking about its trees. And I know that there's a long history. Well, if you go all the way back to the very beginning, the Welling family who came here and founded much of what was the community of Milwaukee, they were orchardists, right? So tree growing and caring for and tending the trees and nurseries has always been a thing here in Milwaukee. But in terms of recent modern history, the city has paid a lot of attention and tried to encourage the planting of trees and the care of trees. There was a street tree program in the 1990s, Main Street, that had an impact. Well, about 10 years ago, the council wanted to develop we didn't have a tree policy, a tree code before this, and we weren't, if you believe, we weren't a Tree City USA. If you come in and out of the city, you'll see our Welcome to Milwaukee signs, and on the top it'll say Tree City USA. I think it just now says 9 years. Some cities have been tree cities for a lot longer than we have, but about 9 years ago, council had, we didn't have a tree board at the time. The council had to be the park board and staff work on developing a tree code, and we adopted a tree code, which created the tree board, which is a group of council-appointed folks, at least one of which is required to be an arborist to work on tree policy. I think they have a role in approving certain tree permits, and so now, love it or hate it, the city has had a tree code which requires certain permits for certain types of trees, and like planning, I only know enough to tell you we have a tree code. There are all kinds of rules. There's something about DB8, which is diameter at breast height, in terms of what kind of permit and how much you have to pay for a permit. We weren't the only ones in the last 10 years to adopt a tree code and require permits. There are some cities, like just north of us, the city of Portland has a very healthy tree code. City like Oswego has one. I mean, we're not the only people with a tree code requiring permits to take down or take care of trees. But I will note that Portland just this month decided to do away with most of their tree code fees because of pushback that city got. So it's a policy question, but and I know people hate it, and I know people really love it, and I know sometimes it's one of those areas where policy goals collide, because housing has been an interesting goal of the city council for a decade. But sometimes you want to build housing, it runs into whether or not you should take down a tree, and taking down trees with permit fees makes housing more expensive. So sometimes you run into conflict with each other. Is there a hand raised?
I was just going to ask, wasn't the max line delayed because of that tree that is right there where the max line was supposed to go over, and they said, no, you can't tear that tree down, and they had to move it like north 10 feet or something like that.
I have vague recollections about a tree involved in that, but I couldn't answer specifically.
Yeah, it's off McLaughlin,
The Kronberg,
yeah, probably.
it was the Kronberg tree.
Yeah.
Boy.
It's between McLaughlin and the,
On the east side of the,
on the east side.
Awesome. Well, I know there's a lot of trees still there, and when we were building the elevated pathway, we went around a lot of trees. It's not that thing. We did end up taking out a couple of trees in that park for that project.
Yeah, this one, when they were building the max line, they had to put protection around it and everything so they
Oh.
couldn't get damaged.
I remember that. We did have to protect the tree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, probably we had to protect the tree. Do you have a question?
No, I just had a couple of trees.
Yes.
I had to go through the whole
Experience.
permit process. The trees were dead, so you didn't, it was $50 for the permit, but I didn't have to pay that because the trees were dead.
Hmm?
And so they came out, cut them down. For every tree you cut down, you have to plant a new one.
Yeah. Have to mitigate.
So, nowhere to put trees. I said, well, I already planted trees. No, it has to be, it's not there, it has to be over here.
Yeah.
So,
Well, glad you went through the process, and I'm glad, that is an important thing to know. If you have a diseased or dying tree, there's no fee for removing something that's going to become a public safety risk. So that's an important thing. I've had other neighbors ask me that question too. And it's a thing that can always be tweaked, so if you run up and have strong opinions about it, you're welcome to share them with the tree board or the city council. And, you know, if a behemoth of an institution like Portland can change its mind, then Milwaukee can change its mind too, if the right pressure's on it.
If we, on our property here with the church, a tree that we are concerned about with possibly disease, like the one right outside the church, we need to contact an ELCA, come look at it, tell us whether or not.
My understanding, and maybe you know more than I, that is, you're supposed to contact the city, and then they're supposed to send someone out to help identify, depending on the situation, we might have to hire an arborist too, but we're supposed to have an arborist on staff. Right now, our arborist just left us for Portland. So I don't know how speedy the city can be right now responding, but call the city, they'll come out and assess it and tell you what.
yeah, they did. I had to take pictures of the trees and go in and got the permit, and they sent somebody out, and she came out, and all she did was send it, yep, you're dead.
Yeah, so,
You don't have to do anything with major trimming back of trees or anything like that? I mean, you could affect the health of a tree if you cut too much.
yeah,
Understanding that.
I'd have to defer to my colleagues, I'm not sure. It's a healthy, it's a lot of code. There's a lot of words in that part of the code.
Don't tell Scott so you can plead the fifth.
I don't know if I was there that meeting, I don't remember. So, I know tree policy, anytime you get more proscriptive about what people can and cannot do on their property, it rightfully so engenders a lot of feelings. And that's a perfect example for opportunities to engage your city and let us know how you feel. Respectfully, of course, and then through the right channels. But,
In the unincorporated parts of this area
Yep.
that belong to Clackamas County, do they have a tree policy?
Yes, they do, because when we bought our house, there was a tree that was technically on the street, not on our property, and it was dead. And I called, and they said they won't remove it, but call them back when it falls. And of course, when it fell onto the property, and then they said, no, it's your responsibility. If it had fallen on the street, they would have come and taken care of it.
Oh, I would have moved it over.
They couldn't do that, it was too big a tree. So yes,
Yes.
they have a policy of they don't do anything until it's dead, it's on the ground.
That is sort of the county's response to a lot of things.
I just think of the naming situation. It seems like the tree board needs a new name.
Oh.
Every board is a tree.
It's terrible.
Good response.
Thank you for the comment.
It'll take
Okay, we're running out of time, and I'm so sorry. I don't know if I can back to the fourth one, but we'll see. We do have some ad hoc, which is short duration temporary committees that come up every once in a while. We've got two right now. Well, we've got one right now. We've got the Transportation System Plan Advisory Committee. They're about done. One of the documents that the cities are supposed to maintain is a master plan. Well, there's the city code, right, with all the rules and laws that the city council adopts. And then there's the comprehensive plan, which is our master land use plan, where we're going our priorities in terms of when we approve projects and seek out our projects and stuff like that. And then there's also the transportation system plan, which is sort of a sub-document of our master plan that obviously is specifically focusing on transportation, which is cars and trucks and light rail train, that we can, as far as we can control, and railroad, but also bike and pedestrian paths, just sort of the whole way people get from point A to point B in the city. And so every 10 to 15 years we update that. We're in the process of updating now. And I believe in the next 6 months the plan is that the TSP Advisory Committee will be presenting a final document for the City Council to review and then adopt a new transportation system plan. So that's an ad hoc committee we got going on. And then they're not ad hoc committees, but I just want to touch on real quick that the City of Milwaukee does have urban renewal and urban renewal district. And much like other policies we mentioned today, urban renewal can be a bad word for a lot of people because of some bad experiences that happened with how urban renewal was used in like the middle of the 20th century to do certain things to create public housing and areas that and address blight in a way that wasn't great. But urban renewal in the way that it's put out and used in Milwaukee and Oregon is a tool to encourage the development, the redevelopment, the rebirth of economic activity and housing and all kinds of things in specific designated areas. The city adopted an urban renewal district back in the 80s, and then it became kind of politically divisive, so they left it alone, and in 2016 it was brought back to life. And the downtown Milwaukee, and then with two little cherry stems out to the central Milwaukee marketplace area, those are all in an urban renewal district. And I don't pretend to know the tax implications, but I know it freezes tax revenue for the city for a while, so that eventually it will encourage more growth, so that more economic activity will happen in those areas, ultimately creating more a wider tax base by the end, something like that. So we have, in Milwaukee, we call it the Milwaukee Redevelopment Commission, that's urban renewal, and we have a Redevelopment Commission Advisory Committee, Community Advisory Committee. And they meet, not regularly, but they meet every once in a while. It's becoming more regular now because it's been an active district for 10 years and there's revenue starting to come in from the taxing district, and they're starting to spend money on infrastructure improvements in downtown Milwaukee, which is exciting to see some of those projects come to be. So, those are the ad hoc ones. What's my next slide?
That was it.
That was it?
Okay,
Okay,
just questions.
I did it. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you
Thank
for
you
letting me.
for coming.
Yes, my pleasure. I'm here every week. Most weeks, Linda.
I do have a question. You mentioned something about, I can't remember which one it was, about having to have an attorney and have to have the law as a background to that program. Does each committee have a law, like with you? Do you have law information, or you have to refer back to the city lawyer?
I'm not an attorney, and we only have, to my knowledge, one attorney on staff, which is our city attorney. And then we do have several attorney firms for specific types of legal questions, like human resources and labor law. We have different firms on retainer. We only have one attorney on staff, and that's our city attorney. And he is
Available to all these committees?
indirectly through staff, yes. Yeah, and he's available to the city council to answer their questions. And should we, when we do end up in court, he or someone who's designated by him is our legal representation.
So all the laws that these committees are ruled by are online somewhere.
Correct.
There you
Go to
go.
MilwaukeeOregon.gov, and we're about to get a new website, so this is going to change in a matter of days. And I've been off this week, so I don't know if it happened already, but under MilwaukeeOregon.gov, you go to contact the city, or helpful links, and then under useful links, somewhere that says the Milwaukee Municipal Code. And it's hosted by a different website, so I can't give you the URL address. It's E360 or something, code 360. Yeah.
Is this first down?
So there's our website. No fireworks in the city. Did everyone hear that?
Yes, we know.
Under useful links and then under helpful links is the municipal code. There it is. Yeah, this is the Milwaukee Municipal Code. It's the codification, the collection, and organization of all the city laws that are currently in effect for the city of Milwaukee.
I have a diamond also.
It's big.
It's about 1,200 pages when you print it.
Oh,
So
don't print it. Is it available at the library at the city hall if you have to look at a hard copy?
We do, yes. Yep.
This is just a curiosity question. Right across from the Waldorf School parking lot where they tore down that bank,
Yes.
what's going into that spot?
Housing.
Housing, okay.
I'm blanking on the number of units, but most people when they hear the number say that many houses on that property. So I don't know if they're a number that might be wrong, but it's gonna be housing. It's gonna be apartment style housing.
We'll have underground parking then, or?
I doubt it. But actually, if you go back to the website, and I don't know if this one's on there, but if you go to under departments, try planning. On the right side, under projects, current projects, there is a list of, yeah, there you go. These are the projects that the city's working on. Scroll up somewhere on our website. And again, I'm sorry, this is about to change to the new website, but scroll up again to see. Up, yeah.
That's completed projects.
Yeah.
The other one.
That's all set.
The other one.
Somewhere, maybe it's under engineering, somewhere there's a list of, like projects, like, building projects that are happening.
There was a,
Projects there,
some called building.
under projects on the right there. Yeah, so, these are at least the city projects, might not be the private one you're asking about, but I thought there was a list of private ones too. But there's a list of poke around, there's a lot of information online on our website, and I thought there was somewhere there's private development too. But anyway, it's 10:31.
And I just wanted to take 1 minute. Thank you again, Scott. It was very wonderful. My I kind of wish I went into social science and politics at some point too, because I kind of stuff that.
It's not too late.
It is not too late. It's true. Just as a taste of what is to come next week and the following weeks, and we can have Scott back too. We don't have to get rid of him, but next week and the following weeks, we're going to look at the new social statement that is going to be recommended to the churchwide 2025 churchwide assembly, which is coming up. The new social statement is civic life and faith, and I'm just going to show you how to find it in case you want to download it ahead of time. So you go to elca.org, you go to faith, and you click on, not social statements, because that's existing social statements, you go to current social writing projects. And then under this, if you scroll down a little bit, it'll say, our social statement on faith and civic life is blah, 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 blah. Go to there. And then it takes you to this page. And then you have to click on another link. To read the text that will be considered by the voting members, you click on this link, and it gives you a Microsoft Word document that you can download. I think I will send this out via the churchwide email this week so that you can access it. But if you want to access it before then, you can go here. This is a long one too. It's 40 some odd pages. How many pages should tell me? It's many, many pages. 51, 52 pages. It is a draft, most importantly. This is a draft. It has not been approved yet. And so what will probably likely happen at the churchwide assembly, similar to what happens at our synod assemblies, is there may be recommendation for approval with edits, with what do you call them, amendments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this is going to be going up. So we're going to look at this next week and the following week, and then the 20th is our, no, I guess just next week. Holy cow. Next week, time flies, because in the following week is our semi-annual meeting. We will come back the end of July and the first week in August to look at this as well too. We can always revisit this in September, right? Because I'm gone for August to Michigan, so pray for me during that time period as well too. But it's gonna be fun. if Scott's here, he can chime in as well too, perhaps. And I would just say the primary motivation behind this document is one, diminishing both civic education in the United States of America and civic engagement, right? So that's one motivation. The other is the rise of white Christian nationalism in the United States of America. This document seeks to address that and the church's role in it specifically. So, if you get a chance, take a peek at it, we'll talk about it. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right, thank you folks.